and welcome to episode 2 of Tom and Ruby, anti-Wank3ry, anti-bullshit, and the facts of course, someone comes home when we start the podcast, and every time someone comes home, the dog goes off. So that is some Wank3ry. We don't want any of that Wank3ry, and we don't want any of, well, actually, you know what? That is exactly what social media sounds like. Barking at every single little thing that someone brings up, like, this is bad, this is good, you should have this, you should have that. And now on today's topic, we are talking about alcohol, because people are like, you can have it in moderation, and then people don't give a shit what social media says about alcohol when all they care about is fitting in with the social crowd, which is usually the reason people go to alcohol. It's like a social glue, or it's an emotional escape from emotions that people don't want to deal with. I'm going to introduce this in a more basic, simple way. And I'm going to do a lot of the talking to start with, because Tom's going to go into a lot of nerdy stuff and a lot of explanation for why things are the way they are and why I say what I say. Now, a lot of people think that alcohol helps with sleep because you feel like you just sleep faster. But yeah, okay, it may help with the sleep onset, but the actual sleep quality, your REM sleep, your deep sleep, they're all disturbed. And it leads to more fragmented sleep. So your second half of the night, which is where you get more of the rapid eye movement, where you have more memory consolidation, where you have all of the things that help you think clearly the next day, they're disrupted. It aggravates. So let's think of digestion this way. Your digestion system only has one goal, and that's to get alcohol out of the system as fast as possible, because it's a toxin. It is a toxin to the body. So everything pretty much gets put on standstill or slowed down in order to get alcohol out, which means your fat burning is going to go down. Your carb use is going to go down. People think as well that it dehydrates you. Yes, it does dehydrate you in the short term, but then it leads to more fluid retention in the long term because of the disturbances that it does to your sodium retention system, just to kind of like say it in simple terms, which Tom can get onto later. It also gets your digestion out of whack. You will, I guess the biggest impact with alcohol are the poor decisions you make the day after. It's the sluggy feeling you feel the day after, where your calorie maintenance becomes a surplus. Why? Because you don't want to move as much. You're not going to put in as much effort into the gym. The terrible thing is that your protein synthesis rates, aka your ability to build muscle, also come down. And also your ability to train hard goes down. So you get a double whammy there, impacting your muscle growth. So I guess aside from that, don't forget your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure goes up, your anxiety can go up. And this is where we run into problems. I'm going to leave this with Tom now to take it away.
Sure. So, I mean, when it comes to alcohol, I think the best place to start is this idea that moderate intakes of alcohol are more beneficial than our complete abstinence. This has been a long-standing idea. People generally talk about things like red wine, like, oh, if you drink a moderate amount of red wine, then that's really good for your health. The problem is that that's probably not really true. So the WHO, World Health Organization, came out with a statement a couple of years ago that basically, in summation, concluded that there is no healthy intake of alcohol. And that probably surprises a lot of people because, yeah, we talk about like the benefits of red wine. Like everybody knows, or most people know, that red wine has all of these beneficial compounds in it. Like it's got the, oh Christ, what's it called? Resveratrol, so the antioxidant jobby that you get in red wine. That's present there. So isn't red wine likely to benefit your health? And the answer is realistically no. The evidence for that primarily comes from observational research. And the issue isn't necessarily that observational research is bad. That's a massively oversimplistic view of it. But when you look at observational research, the biggest question is how was it done and what was controlled for? And the majority of this observational research was unfortunately industry funded. And so when you look at industry funded research, you need to look at it in even more detail than you ordinarily would. Because if I wanted to find that eating Mars bars is beneficial, depending how I asked the question, I could probably find that, right? So I don't think it's good to just dismiss these studies out of hand. We need to look at it in detail. The primary problem with much of the research that conflates moderate wine consumption with improvements in health is either mechanistic. So the research just says, oh, there's these compounds in it which are good, and therefore it's probably good. That doesn't mean anything. That's a massive leap. Or we're not controlling for socioeconomic status. The fact of the matter is that wine, especially red wine, can be quite expensive. Drinking it on a regular basis is not the cheapest thing in the world. And also, to drink red wine on a regular basis, you kind of need to have a job where you don't need to wake up really early every day. You don't need to be working long hours, because you're not going to be able to do that on red wine. If you look at red wine versus beer consumption, for example, red wine is associated with improvements in health. Beer is associated with poorer health outcomes. But then if you look at the alcohol consumption by socioeconomic status, beer is drank by poorer people, wine is drank by richer people. And when you control for that, the link doesn't really exist. There's essentially no evidence that consuming moderate amounts of alcohol is beneficial outside of this bad standard of data. And so given the mechanisms that I'm going to talk about in a second, and given everything that Ruby said, where we're talking about you're more tired the next day, so you're going to be more likely to skip the gym. You're going to be more likely to make food choices. And that's before we talk about the fact that drunk people don't eat salads. It shouldn't come as too much of a surprise that drinking alcohol is not great for you. I think the question, though, is what do we do with that? Because as Ruby says, a lot of the time when you're drinking, it is going along with the social crowd, but I don't necessarily think that's a bad idea. I mean, Ruby, do you drink at all?
I choose not to, no.
Fair enough. I drink a lot less than I used to, but I do like a beer. We don't get very long summers here in the UK. We get about 7 days of it. So I'm going to have a barbecue. And when I'm having that barbecue, I'm going to have a beer with it. And it's never held back my fat loss. It's never held back my lifting. Has it had a negative effect on my health? It's difficult to quantify that. But there's a couple of things that you can do if you're going to drink to kind of mitigate the negative health outcomes of drinking.
I do want to say there is something that makes it different in your circumstance, as well as the fact that you are highly active, the fact that you do have a lot more of a metabolic buffer, so to speak. If we are talking females versus males, there is a difference in the way that females also metabolize alcohol, but there's also the fact that we are smaller humans. We weigh less, we have less muscle mass. We don't metabolize things the same because of the fact that we have less muscle mass. And then adding on to that, the closer that you get into your perimenopause state, the more detrimental alcohol is going to be for you, because you already do not have estrogen there. You already have things going against you as it is, and alcohol is just adding to that. And it is empty calories. I actually consider alcohol as liquid fat in a sense, because fat is usually the first thing to get stored as fat. But when you bring alcohol into the picture, that's the first thing that's going to need to be metabolized, even though it's not stored in the body. Everything else goes on hold / slows down. So that's the way that I refer to it. But the way that, is a glass here and there going to hold you back from your goals? No, if you actually factor it into your daily intake. But how many people stick to how many drinks they said they're going to have? I have people saying that they're going to have one, or they're going to have two, and before you know it, they're having 5 or 6. And that's when shit goes awry. And if you can set bright lines, there is nothing wrong with having alcohol. I tell my girls, have 1 to 2 a week. That is fine. But as soon as you're having one every single night, that's when it becomes an issue. What is this actually, what purpose is this serving you right now? And especially
100%.
Yeah,
100%. I really like that as well, because that's the question, right? Can you have beer every day and it's not going to negatively affect your health? if you're an active person, you're controlling a few your calories, probably. But if I was to talk to somebody and they have a beer every day, like the question is like, why? Like, how much thought are you putting into that? What are you using that to? Like, oh, I need to have a beer every day to relax. It's like, well, maybe we need to look at alternative strategies to help you relax, for example, or maybe we need to look at ways to reduce the amount that you need to relax after a really hard day, because not every day should feel like that.
I
I think that's where the interesting thing comes in.
Exactly, but I really want to relate this in a way that people can factor in, how does this information benefit me? Why am I listening to this? And that's, well, hey, you're a female, you have, let's just say, especially if you're in a deficit, you have, let's say, 1,400 all the way up to 2,000 to play with. Maybe you have the luxury of having more. That alcohol is taking away from where you could get other nutrients. That alcohol is also depleting your body of nutrients. Your B vitamins, your energy vitamins, your vitamins that help you metabolize protein, carbs, and fats, that system gets downregulated, which is why sometimes your digestion gets shot. But you aren't what you eat, you are what you absorb, and you won't be able to absorb the things that you should be absorbing as soon as this alcohol becomes more of a daily thing. And if you're wondering why you're in whatever age group you're in, you're slumping around wondering why you have so much stored belly fat, well, what is that alcohol displacing, and how much of it are you having, and are you actually factoring it into your calories? Because that alcohol ain't filling you up. If anything, it's going to make you more hungry. Continue.
Yeah, and this is the thing. Like, this is where the dose becomes the poison, because, as you said, like, a couple glasses a week ain't going to make a difference. A bottle a night's going to make a difference. And I suppose, like, an interesting part of that question is, like, why is that? And the primary reasons is because when you consume alcohol, there are two different pathways that your body can use to get rid of it, and it kind of depends on how much you've drank, because it's based on the blood alcohol level that you have, as to which of these metabolic pathways get used. So the basic way to explain it is, in your liver, you've got a bunch of cells, and that's where all the metabolism happens. When people hear that you metabolize things in the liver, I think sometimes you think of the liver kind of like another stomach, like it's another balloon and the liver fills up and it happens there. But no, stuff gets absorbed into the liver kind of like a sponge, and each one of the cells does stuff. At a very low blood alcohol level, when your liver can just sort of get rid of alcohol nice and slowly because it doesn't need to metabolize it really quickly, the metabolism of that alcohol happens just in the cytosol of the cell. So we all remember from high school biology, animal cell kind of looks like an egg. It's got a nucleus in the middle, all of that liquidy stuff in there. Alcohol can be metabolized in that. And when that happens, all that happens is that the ethanol, which is the alcohol, that gets converted into something called acetaldehyde. Now, acetaldehyde is a toxin. It's really bad for you. Acetaldehyde concentrations, when they're really high, that's associated with worse hangovers. Acetaldehyde, high concentration, can cause nausea. It can cause flushing of the skin and sweating and all that kind of stuff. Ruby?
Cancer.
We're going to get to that. It can, but your body can metabolize it fairly quickly. So what happens after it's acetaldehyde is it becomes acetate. Acetate's inert. Your body can just deal with that fine. That's then converted into acetyl-CoA, which goes into your metabolic pathways and all that bollocks, and you create ATP and you can use it as energy. And that's where, like, the calories from alcohol come from-ish. Now, there's another way that you can metabolize alcohol called microsomal oxidation, which is basically the same thing, apart from you produce a ton of reactive oxygen species or free radicals. Now, we spoke about these last time we were on the podcast. Free radicals in low doses produced by exercise can be a beneficial thing, but you don't want to get loads of them. These free radicals can bind onto liver cells. They can cause inflammation. They can spread around the body, cause inflammation, and that's where the cancer risk comes from. The elevated levels of microsomal oxidation are associated with increased risk of cancer, increased risk of things like Alzheimer's disease. And this is where we get things like, I think for a while it was called the French paradox, I think, or I might be conflating that with something else. But if you look at the alcohol consumption in, like, the Mediterranean countries, like, moderate intakes of red wine are considered to be a part of the Mediterranean diet in many instances. And that's because there's a difference between having a single glass of wine with a meal and doing what we tend to do in English-speaking countries, which is where you have a single bottle of wine on an afternoon. There's a big difference there, because when you have alcohol alongside food, it slows down the rate at which the alcohol hits your blood, which reduces your blood alcohol level, and then your liver can do this cytosolic oxidation. And yeah, it's not great, but it's just producing energy effectively. But when you're drinking alcohol in large quantities, when you're drinking it really quickly, or when you're drinking it in the absence of food, that's when your body starts to tick into microsomal oxidation, and that's where a lot of these problems come in. So is a moderate amount of alcohol safe? It's unlikely. As Ruby mentioned, a moderate alcohol intake is associated with an increased risk in cancer. Here in the UK, we had a big, there's a massive observational study that's going on all the time called the Nurses Study. That's because most of the nurses in the UK are all employed by the NHS, so they're a really easy cohort to follow up on because they all work for the same company. There's millions of them, and I think there's literally millions of them. And also, they all earn, like, you can control for wages because you know what they're getting paid because you're paying them. And in the nurses study, there was basically a dose response increase in breast cancer risk with alcohol starting at 1 gram per week. So like any alcohol consumption at all was associated with an increased risk of breast cancer. And so we can't take this moderate intake doesn't lead to microsomal oxidation as like a get out of jail free card, but it does kind of explain why we see the results that we do, where the risk of alcohol consumption is fairly low until you start getting above, it's about 10 units a week. 10 units a week, ideally spread over like 3 to 5 days, so you're not drinking lots on one day, which is where you get this different metabolic rate thing happening. That mitigates risk. And Ruby and I differ in our coaching practices in that I'm either more of a cynic or more of a realist, depending on the way you look at it. I don't expect people to cut out alcohol. It might be a difference in country thing. I know Ruby's in Australia, so the drinking culture is not that different. But I live in the northeast of England. We drink more than anyone else in the UK, and the UK drink more than most of the people in the world. I'm not expecting.
I don't restrict it. It's more so keeping it 1 to 2 a week. Like there are some girls where it's just like, okay, if you're drinking a bottle a night, let's reduce it from there. Like it's taking a step-by-step approach, but you need to be realistic as well with what you want out of it. And like we were saying just before, why is it that you're going to alcohol all the friggin' time? Because 3 of my girls, as an example, used it not only as social glue, but it became more, they never saw it as a problem until they realized it was the very thing that was holding them back from results. But they never even, they were in denial about it. 2 of the girls were in denial about it. So here she is 4 months into coaching, wondering why she isn't seeing any changes. Then all of a sudden she admits to the fact that she's been drinking every weekend and also through the week, and she never actually accounted for it, and she never even wanted to admit it. And now that she's finally doing the right things, she notices the difference. Not only in that, but in her mental clarity. Maybe we can even go into talking about the gray matter in the brain.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think it's the acetaldehyde that's not great for your brain, but realistically, as anyone who's ever drank will know, when you drink, you get drunk. And those effects can be a little bit more longer lasting than people realize. It's not great for your central nervous system. Now, the idea that drinking kills brain cells, to my knowledge, isn't well established. But if you're drinking like large amounts, enough to get drunk, that's going to make you feel sluggish and slow the next day. It's probably going to affect your hydration status. It's probably going to affect your eating. And that's not great for mental clarity. There's a reason that people who stop drinking entirely get all preachy about it, and because it does feel really good when you don't drink anymore. But it's one of those where I think, Ruby, I think you mentioned this early on, like it's so culturally normalized. Like it's kind of wild if you step back and think of alcohol as a drug, which it is. It's a psychoactive substance. If you take a step back and think of alcohol as a drug, it's kind of wild how like broadly marketed it is and how it's like expected. Like you turn the age where you're allowed to drink now, and it's expected that you're just gonna. It's not like when you turn the age that you're allowed to buy cigarettes, people just expect that you're gonna start smoking. Like it's a very different thing. The first time you meet someone that could sell you heroin, you're not expected to start taking heroin. Like it's only alcohol that we treat like this. which is interesting. But to step back to one thing that I do think is important, because I am a realist and I do think people are going to drink. I don't think, I think it would be better if for people's health if they just didn't drink at all. But I also don't think that physical health is the only reason we make decisions. And if you're going to have a couple of beers at a barbecue and that makes your summer better, I think that's a worthy trade-off for a lot of people, and I understand that, and that's what I do. Accounting for the calories does make a difference. There's a good study. It is done on men, but I see no reason to assume it wouldn't be the case for women, because women don't defeat physics. But there was a good study in men where participants had a controlled calorie intake, but they were given 400 calories of either grape juice or wine. So it was like matched for everything, like nutrients and all that kind of stuff. And it was controlled for in their intake, and there was no difference in fat loss outcomes across the course of, I think it was like a 10-week diet. Similarly, however, a very interesting study, if I'm fairly certain it was in a metabolic ward, people with obesity and people without obesity were given, I want to say it was like 3/4 of a bottle of wine every day, for a period of time. And what happened was the people with obesity gained weight and the people without obesity didn't. And the mitigating factor was the fact that the people without obesity, when they were given the wine, compensated for that by eating less. The people with obesity didn't. And when the researchers did like further analysis and such, that seems to be mediated by impulsiveness. So if you're an impulsive person, when you drink and that reduces your inhibitions, that's when you're going to fall face first into a kebab. Whereas if you're a less impulsive person and you drink a bunch, you might have more, I'm not going to say self-control, but you might have more like executive control to think, well, okay, like, yeah, I've drank a lot, but I don't need that really tasty thing. And that's hard to do because when you're drunk, you get an increased amount of dopamine when you eat tasty food. You get a higher threshold for hyperpalatability. So you're basically, you need more tasty food to feel good, but when you do feel good, you feel better. So it's not too hard to understand why drunk people don't eat salads. However, if you can control for that and you want to have a couple of beers, it's fine. But just know that it's not just weight control that matters here. So if you're drinking half a bottle of wine a night or you're having 4 beers a night, even if you're controlling for that in your calories and it's not affecting your body composition, like there's more to life than body composition. There's other shit that's important. And as Ruby said, cognitive function and cancer risk, I think, are 2 big ones.
There's a lot of health risks that come with that consumption, but I would be very surprised if it's not actually impacting your body composition with how it actually alters how your body uses fuels, because you won't be adequately burning fat nor using carbs in your performance. And we all know that when you train, building muscle is what we want for body composition. So I would unless you're taking PEDs, which is a completely different topic in itself, I will not assume someone that drinks that much is going to have a very favorable body composition. I mean, we all know those guys with the big gut, and we know those females that complain about a lot of friggin' belly fat. Like, there is a lot there. In the last podcast, we were speaking about inflammation. Alcohol is an inflammatory substance. And I came across a study that showed a link, but we spoke about this in the other podcast about we need to be really sure about how things link together. But people with endometriosis, it's an inflammatory condition, but there is a significant association between even moderate alcohol and people with endometriosis. And there are other inflammatory diseases that have the same thing, like Crohn's, like IBD, like you can factor in anything here, like even PCOS, because you're already insulin resistant as it is. And then there are people that worry about sugar and artificial sweeteners and carbs and things that you shouldn't even be worrying about if you're a chronic drinker or a chronic weekend drinker. Like, that is worse for you. And why would you want to take a detox supplement when you're completely mitigating what you're taking anyway, while getting rid of any idea of detoxing your body, when you're just filling up your liver with more toxins from the alcohol? So it's like you need to figure out where your priorities lie, because you can't worry about things that aren't really that top of the pyramid, as in things you should be worrying about when you're drinking alcohol on a consistent basis. But like we said, maybe we can actually talk about then there's also the anxiety and the depression, and things impact people different ways. If you're someone that has high blood pressure, if you're someone that has, let's say, diabetes, but I would mainly say high blood pressure, it would impact you a lot more because it increases your blood pressure, it increases your heart rate. So if you aren't in a healthy state to start with, everything that alcohol does negatively is going to impact you a lot more than talking about a healthy individual. So they're different things to think about. Like, moderate alcohol is okay, but for who are we talking about? There are so many things that come into this, but seeing as we both don't completely restrict alcohol, maybe we can talk about ways that it can actually, well, I guess not talk about ways, but like, if you were to drink alcohol as part of your week, things to consider are that if you're going to take it away from carbs or fats, it is equal to 2 grams, like 1 gram of alcohol is 2 grams of carbs or 1 gram of fat. That's something to keep in mind as well. I would say it's about that. It's about 2 grams of carbs and 1 gram of fat. And then, yeah, it's similar to that. And then I would also say make sure that you're drinking water in between your alcohol beverages because it is going to be dehydrating. I would also say making sure that you fill up on salads and fruit if you want to, but mainly full of veggies, full of salads, full of protein and lower calorie options through the day. Do not starve yourself. Do not skip meals, because if you drink alcohol on an empty stomach, you are going to get impacted by it a lot more. I guess that makes you a lightweight, but it's not what you want. I'll let Tom kind of sum it up in that same regard.
100%. I'm trying. There was a the thing that you just mentioned there was coined. I don't know if this was just a UK thing, but it was coined drunkorexia, which is where people will save their calories all day so that they can drink later on. That is a terrible idea.
Like, that's the thing. Like, it's, why are you doing this? Like, what's the purpose behind the behavior? And I can tell you right now, the person I was when I did that stuff, I was in such a negative place with my body, such a negative place with my life, that I was going to alcohol for the emotional escape. So if this is something that you struggle with, please seek out a therapist, because I was like, the person I was needed a therapist. The person I was not emotionally stable. The person I was got hooked on that after feeling of, I don't have to deal with my emotions because I can blame it on the alcohol. But I was a lightweight and I still drank over that. That's the thing. Like, actually question your habits and do seek out therapy if this is something that is emotionally, like, it's an emotional toll. It's not a light matter.
I mean, to let my little lefty out, a lot of the reason why people do drunkorexia is because of internalized fat phobia. Like, we have this idea that it doesn't matter what it does to my health as long as I don't gain fat, because gaining fat is worse than the negative consequences of drinking alcohol on an empty stomach. Drinking alcohol on an empty stomach, that microsomal oxidation, so you're increasing your cancer risk. You're going to get more drunk, which leads to worse hangovers, which means you feel way worse the next day. But people will accept that because, oh, well, at least I'm not gaining fat, which I think is an interesting topic on its own. 2 things to touch on that you mentioned. You mentioned alcohol affects people different if they have high blood pressure or diabetes. Both of those are very true. Diabetes, especially people with diabetes. And if you saw me like doing this on my face when you were talking there, it's because I was trying to remember, but I can't remember my physiology, so I apologize. But there is a reason why people with diabetes slip into microsomal oxidation faster. So if you have diabetes or pre-diabetes or otherwise are insulin resistant, when you drink alcohol, your body will produce more reactive oxygen species than would a person who had regular insulin control. So it's definitely worse for you if you do that. And if you are on performance, sorry, go for it.
Is something to do with then, because when you're diabetic, you already have, like, it's why people can get blindness when they're diabetic, because of their sensitivity to sugar. And that's pretty much what, like, alcohol makes you a lot more sensitive to that stuff.
It's something to do with a change in the way the liver metabolizes nutrients broadly, but I can't remember. It doesn't matter. It is. Trust me. And if you're on performance enhancing drugs, don't drink, please. Jesus Christ. You've already got screwed up blood lipids. Like, you don't need alcohol making that worse. In terms of tips, so like if you're gonna drink, tips I would always have are is eating's cheating a phrase that's global, or is that a Northeast thing? Like, has anyone ever heard that before?
Never heard it.
No, right. So when I was growing up, eating's cheating was like the typical thing. Basically, if you eat before you go out, you're going to get less drunk, and that's cheating. So don't eat before you go out so you can get more drunk. That was the attitude that you grew up with in the Northeast. That's why we are the binge drinking capital of the UK. Go team. Eating is not cheating. If you're going to drink alcohol, make sure you've got a decent amount of food on your stomach first. In Ireland, I believe they call it lining. So yeah, make sure you've got a decent amount of food first. As Ruby says, plenty of nutritious whole foods, plenty of protein, plenty of fruits and vegetables, some whole grains, healthy fats. You want to get that in your stomach because that's going to slow down the rate at which the alcohol hits your bloodstream, meaning that your liver can take its time metabolizing it. Also, if you're going to drink to the point that you're going to get drunk, don't do it often, but if you do, it can be a good idea to plan the food you can eat when you get home. Whether that is make yourself some sandwiches, pop them in the fridge so you can eat them when you get in, something like that, because otherwise you're going to get home and eat like a box of cereal and then order a pizza or whatever. So like, just strategize. It doesn't have to be like, I'm going to come home and eat some tomatoes. Like, it can be a little bit kind of like junky, but at least if you prepare it beforehand, you can account for it, you know what it's going to be, and you can make a good decision when you're in the mindset to make a good decision rather than when you're drunk.
I would also add a really good quality B vitamin complex to the meal you have before bed as well, because by the time you wake up in the morning, at least your body will process that and you can kind of save what you can with your B vitamins.
Yeah, not a bad show. I really like the drink water or a soft drink in between drinks thing. A lot of the time when people drink loads, it's just because once you get into the swing of things, and it's like you always need to have a drink in your hand. And when you drink at the same pace. Like, people tend to drink drinks at a fairly consistent pace. And if you have like a beer or a glass of wine and then you have a water, you'll drink that water at the pace that you would have drank the wine. You'll get less drunk throughout the night. You'll stay more hydrated. You'll save some money, which is nice. Alcohol is damn expensive at bars. But just having that water will also allow you to have the drink in your hand while you're talking to people, and it's just a good idea.
I will also, because you mentioned that, I think, was that your last tip?
Probably.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've heard from a lot of people that they just need to have a drink in their hand to feel like they fit in. Get yourself a Diet Coke instead of alcohol if you can, because body composition goals and seeking your best body composition, best performance does not go hand in hand with alcohol drinking. If you look at, I'm going to try to get a lady online that's going to spit out some harsh truths, especially about alcohol, because she has a very hard, like, a talk to come to Jesus kind of moment about alcohol all the time. It just does not have a place in that sort of health and fitness lifestyle, except on the odd occasion, like maybe a Christmas drink, maybe a birthday drink. But then again, you don't want to take it from your life if it is something that brings you joy, because I would argue that having a drink, maybe 2 drinks every week, if it actually, like, if you're someone that busts ass all week and that is your way to actually give yourself some self-care, even though I would argue you need a better self-care regimen, but if that is you, like, let's just say that's your meaning of stress relief as well, and it's only that 1 or 2 a week, I would argue that that's okay. But you do need to figure out where else you can get that from instead of alcohol, because it's not the healthiest choice, but it's not going to, I'm not going to say it's not going to kill you, but it's not going to be a devil in Prada.
Well, it's not going to kill you. Two drinks a week's not going to kill you.
It's not.
I mean, I think that's the thing. It doesn't have to be either or. I mean, I I'm sympathetic to the idea that alcohol has no place in a healthy lifestyle for the reasons that I've outlined. The WHO says there's no healthy intake, but I think that sort of mistakes the purpose of a healthy lifestyle. Like, to me, the purpose of leading a healthy lifestyle
includes
is
social and emotional
well, just
benefits.
yeah, just the purpose of leading a healthy lifestyle is so that I feel good day to day. It's so that I've got the energy to do what I want. It's so that I feel confident in my body, and it means that I'm going to live into my later years because I want to enjoy those later years. I don't think the purpose of a healthy lifestyle is to be as restrictive as possible around things that I consider to be not healthy. Because I think at that point, your healthy lifestyle becomes not about the things you do and the reason you do them. It's about the things you don't do and the reason you don't do them. And I think at that point, when you're defining yourself by what you don't do, you're running into some real problems. Like, for me, health, fitness, good nutrition, that is there to make my life better. And if I ever got to the point where either I said, "Oh, I don't think I could say no to a drink," that's a problem. But I also think it's a problem if I'm at a barbecue or a social event and someone's like, "Oh, Tom, do you want a beer?" And I immediately think, if I have that, I'm going to feel really guilty. Like, that is equally a problem.
I'm gonna agree to that, because the last time I had a drink, aside from my little histamine outbreak, because of the gut issue that I had, someone had 50-year-old whiskey, and if I had to pick any alcohol, I love whiskey and I love it aged. So I wanted to have a sip of it. I had one sip and my body broke out in rash because of the gut issue that I had. Like, this is another thing. Like, if you're suffering gut issues, if you're suffering immune issues, if you're intolerant to histamines, you already know that staying away from alcohol is what you need to do. So you need to know thyself. But if I was at a wedding or something, or if I was bonding with my dad, because my dad, I'm wog, wine, but I try to get my dad to not drink any because he's really old. And when you're old, that, like, really old, as in like he's in his 70s. But it's like when you're in that older age group, you are definitely not metabolizing alcohol very well at all. So you need to know the way that shit works for you. But I think that summarizes everything. Is there anything else you want to add?
Yeah. I mean, I do think it's funny when people get to that age. Like, I always remember my grandma smoked. So my grandma was my mother's mother's mother. And like, she was 90 odd, and like, she smoked, and it's like, why would she quit? Like, what difference is that going to make to the rest of her life? like she's got a couple of years left. Just enjoy your cigarettes, you'll be fine.
It's so like, you can actually see, like, with my dad, like, he would have the smallest mouthful and you can actually see it impact him so quickly. Like, that's the thing when you're that age. It just, like, shit. It's like the fatorexia or whatever person.
But yeah, I think to kind of summarize the place I stand on it and the way I talk to clients about it is just like, you'd be healthier if you didn't drink any alcohol. So start from that standpoint. If you're going to drink alcohol, enjoy it, drink water in between, eat around it, and make it as rare as your lifestyle allows. And I think as long as a person understands that alcohol's not great for you for like serious reasons, the choice of whether or not to drink, it's up to them. It's got nothing to do with me. I'm not your dad. But you will be better off if you didn't drink it, broadly speaking.
Yeah, and I'll summarize it by saying the way that I would also approach it, on top of like everything that Tom said. But on top of that, if you're going to drink, actually set yourself a limit before you drink. Set yourself a hard limit. There is no ifs or buts. It's not, I might have one more. No, you are not having one more. You are setting yourself a limit. If your limit's 3, not 1, so be it. But set yourself that limit, and that is what you stick to. And imagine how you want to wake up the next day. Imagine how you want to go to sleep. Imagine how you want to feel when you put your head on the pillow, when you wake up the next day. But whatever it is, set yourself a hard limit and stick to it. Because it's when you break that promise to yourself that shit gets chaotic. Wank3ry, great, said it. But
The only thing I'd add to that is add a mechanism so that you can't break your limit, because drunk people make really shit decisions. So if you're going to a barbecue, just take 3 drinks with you. Like, don't take a bottle of rum and assume you'll have 3 drinks out of it. Like, take the amount that you're going to drink. If you're in a bar, ask the staff not to serve you more than 3. Big bars, that's always going to be difficult to do. But if you're in a small bar with 1 or 2 servers, that's not too hard. It's not the 70s anymore. People are really understanding about stuff like that. People don't tend to push alcohol as much. Tell your friends, don't give me more than 3. I'm trying to stick to 3. Most people are going to be really accommodating.
And if they're not, that's a reflection on them being jealous for you. That's the thing always. It's like, why the fuck would, like, no one has the repercussions of any choice that you make except you. No one's going to give a shit about anything except you. If you're worried about being judged for something, that is a reflection on you because you judge other people. So I'll leave it at that.
Good point.
Perfect. So next week we are talking artificial sweeteners and we will finish up our talk on sugar.
Sounds good.
See you next week. And Ruby's trying to find her mouse on the which because I have 2 freaking screens. Let's see. Control R. Oh, there it is. Okay. There we go. Bye guys.